Hello and welcome to CJAD 6361, Advanced Constitutional Law. This is week 8, and we're going to talk about those amendments, and we're going to talk about some things about the Constitution that we haven't covered all semester. Specifically, those amendments that aren't part of due process. You know, this is a criminal justice class, and we needed to focus on due process. But I've seen something occurring over the last few weeks that troubles me, and that is the 9th and 10th Amendment. The 9th and 10th Amendments are those amendments that were put in the Bill of Rights as a way to restrict the power of the government. See, our founding fathers were worried to death of tyranny. They fought against the tyranny of the British Empire, against King George III, and what they saw as tyrannical actions by the government. So they rebelled. They had the American Revolution. They created their own government after the experiment known as the Confederation. They came up with this republic. And this republic, this form of government, is a government that restricts the power of government. And if this authority or this power is not granted in the Constitution, those rights are returned to the people. Okay. We see a lot of people, and we've been watching on the news, a lot of people have been talking about how the federal government needed to do this, that, or the other. They wanted President Trump to establish a nationwide stay-at-home. He wanted President Trump to sign the War Powers Act, giving control of the economy, giving total control of all manufacturing to the President of the United States. Okay. This is something that was done prior to World War II, where the government was able to dictate what companies made and created. And it gives sole power of the economy to the president, okay, which I have major problems with. Anyway, the 10th Amendment states that if this is not a designated, the 10th Amendment is the policing powers amendment of the Constitution, and it reinforces the policing clause of the Constitution. If this power is not given to the federal government by the Constitution, those powers and that authority is returned to the state. So the Constitution of the United States is a restricting document. It doesn't allow the federal government to do whatever it wants willy-nilly. So when COVID-19 struck and it attacked our people, the government had to do a response, and the proper response for the government would have been to aid and assist the states as they need assistance, and let the states and the governors dictate the policing powers, which is given to the states via the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights and the 10th Amendment. So, does the government have the ability, the federal government have the ability to give a nationwide stay-at-home order? No, they do not. It is in the 9th Amendment. It is protected by the First Amendment with the right to assemble. The 9th Amendment ensures that the government cannot override and take away the inalienable rights that we have been given as individuals by the Creator, regardless of who you think the Creator is. The Creator is not the government. The Creator is not the Democratic Party. The Creator is not the Republican Party. The Creator is not the founding fathers of our nation. The Creator is the supreme being of all things. The Egyptians called him Ra. I call him, well, Doesn't matter what I call him. He's a supreme being. The Ninth Amendment gives all rights and instills all rights and power and authority to the people, unless the government and the Constitution of the United States specifically gives it and specifically lists that right. The 10th Amendment gives power to the states, unless the Constitution gives an automatic power or authority to the federal government. Those rights and powers are designated and reserved to the states. We had this war, we had this fight back in 1861, where the 13 states seceded from the Union, stating that the federal government did not have a power to dictate whether or not slavery was allowed in their states. Okay. It was a fight over the economy. We want to talk about, it was over slavery. Yes, it was over slavery. But more importantly, the Civil War was about the economy of the South. And did the federal government, the national central government, have the authority and the power to dictate state economy and how the states policed their states? So we had a civil war over that. The federal government won that war. In 1865, the South conceded and they surrendered, unconditionally surrendered, giving the authority to control state economy at the government level. But we still have the 10th Amendment, and the states still have that power. If this federal government was going to take and keep this authority and keep this power, they would have eliminated the 10th Amendment when they had control back in 1865. They could have overridden the 10th Amendment, but they didn't do it. So back in March, back in January 29th or 30th, President Trump stopped all travel of foreign nationals into this country from China. He allowed Americans to come back. Say, hey, this is America, come home. People are getting sick in China, you don't need to be there, come home. Everybody else, we're not letting anybody else into this country. Okay. He did the right thing. He got our people. He got Americans to come back to the United States. He put them in quarantine for 2 weeks, didn't allow them to have access or interaction with anybody for 2 weeks. But the coronavirus still got here. We had political leaders going into town and going into city and saying, hey, come out and party. It's safe. The coronavirus won't kill you. And then we found out that they were wrong. And 60,000 to date, 60,000 Americans have died from the coronavirus. It came in from China. It came in from Europe. It came in from all of the worldwide travel. And the governors, some governors of some states, were screaming, President Trump, you need to issue a nationwide quarantine, a nationwide stay-at-home order. And President Trump refused to do it. Governors and people and political leaders from the opposition party told President Trump, you need to enact the War Powers Act because we are in a war footing. We don't have enough ventilators. We don't have enough PPE. We don't have enough personal protection equipment. We don't have enough masks. We need you to declare a national emergency so that you can take control of manufacturing so that we can have all of this stuff manufactured. So Ford stopped making cars and they started making ventilators. And 3M stopped making electronic devices and recording devices and all the stuff 3M makes, and they started making personal protection gear. They made surgical gowns and they made masks. And all of this is under presidential order because the states all signed a state of emergency. And then the states went to the president and said, you need to declare a national emergency. You need to enact the War Powers Act so that you, as the president, can dictate manufacturing so that we can have all of this stuff made to help fight against this plague because it's going to kill so many people. The states in droves went to the president of the United States and said, take control, take power. So he did that. He told the states, I'm not issuing a stay-at-home order. If you want to issue a stay-at-home order, that's a state order. You have to do that as the governor. So we got these governors from across the country setting up these draconian measures, arresting preachers for having services on Easter, okay, for not closing their church doors, for violating the stay-at-home orders, for violating the social distancing orders, for having more than 10 people in a group. Do you know what? It doesn't matter how many people you have in a group. If one person in that group has a coronavirus, he's giving it to everybody else. Anybody, somebody comes in contact with the coronavirus, he's giving it to everybody else. Unless you have an immune system that has been enhanced through your diet or through the vitamins that you take, the things that you do. But the states gave all of this power to the president. The states violated the 10th Amendment and said, we don't want to do this, you do this. It's not our responsibility, it's the federal government's responsibility. It wasn't. It's not the federal government's responsibility to ensure that the hospitals have enough masks. It's not the federal government's responsibility to ensure that they have enough personal protective equipment for the medical staff. That is a state's power as guaranteed by the 10th Amendment. Yes, the federal government can have a reserve and they can have stuff put together in case the state needs help. But it's not the federal government's power or responsibility unless there's a national emergency. So the states demanded, and the president succumbed to these demands, and he declared a national emergency. And then he goes, I have all the power and I have all the control, which he does. He has every state, every province, every territory of the United States has declared a state of emergency and has requested the federal government for assistance. The federal government has established and created a national emergency and established and created the War Powers, or enacted the War Powers Authority to control the economy. When the president says, I have control of everything, he does. And the states gave him that power. If the president decides tomorrow that he wants to reopen the economy, he can say, I am reopening the economy, which means, and what this means, is that he is now releasing those businesses to go back to doing business. They're no longer creating supplies to fight this pandemic. These companies, he's released these companies to go back to building cars and trucks and ambulances and whatever they want to make. Whatever their business was to make, they are released to go do that. And I'm waiting on the president to do that. But now that we're in this world and we have given all of this control to the president says, I'm gonna reopen the economy. I have the control to do this. Now we've got all of these governors from the opposition party saying, it's the 10th Amendment. You don't have the power to reopen our government. It's my right. I'm the governor. You can't tell me what to do. Right. You're absolutely right. Other than the fact that you have a state of emergency, you have sought the federal government for help and assistance, and the president, under pressure from you, has declared a national emergency, has enacted the War Powers Act, and all of manufacturing is dedicated to fighting the enemy known as COVID-19. You gave it to the president. You can't just now turn around and say, I want my power back. I didn't like the fact that I gave it to you. You have no power to tell me what I can do as a state. Right, you're right. You didn't. Back in January, he had no right to tell you what to do as a state. In February, he had no right to tell you what to do as a state. In March, when every state declared a state of emergency and the national government declared a national emergency, and we enacted the War Powers Act to dedicate all manufacturing to fight COVID, you gave him that power. You forfeited the 10th Amendment. You forfeited the 9th Amendment, and you gave all this power to President Trump. He wants to open it back up. So let's open it back up. The governor in Georgia said, you know what? I'm opening. The governor here in Texas, he's not going as outrageous as the governor in Georgia has. He's having a measured response. A lot of things will open on Friday. We'll have a lot more services that will be available to us come Friday. In a couple of weeks, I should be able to go get a haircut. But the 9th and 10th Amendments are important, and that's what our discussion is going to be. I've been 16 minutes. I'm only allowed 15. I've got so much more to say, but I don't have the time. Stay safe. Stay home. Remember to social distance. If you have to go into public, bring a mask. Not for your protection, because those masks aren't going to protect you anyway. Those masks are going to protect other people, and they're going to protect other people's sanity. Okay. The mask, all it does is deflect. So if you cough or you sneeze, those particles are going to go out the sides of the mask, they're going to go out the top and the bottom of the mask, and you're still going to expose people. But for the peace of mind and the sound of mind of those people in this country who are afraid of the coronavirus, make sure you wear a mask. As you can see, I'm in my office. I'm not at home. I'm at work, in my office. I planned to go spend my summer in state parks. I was going to social distance. I was going to go fishing every day. I was going to stay away from people. I was going to help the economy and help the state by paying to stay in these state parks. The governor closed the state parks. They're still closed to overnight visitors as of this recording, which is April 28th, 2020 at 11:16 a.m. The parks are still closed. So I'm not going to go to the parks. I'm not going to give my money to the state. I'm not going fishing every day. I'm going to grow a garden. I'm going to water a garden every day. I'm going to eat the food that I make, because you can't get it at the store without going through a food line. Because we're worried about contracting and spreading the coronavirus. Some experts say that 80% of the country already have or had the coronavirus, and they don't even know it. The death rate is at less than 1%. Stay safe, stay healthy. If you have a fever, stay home.